There we are. Hello, friends. Welcome into this all-new Pack-A-Day members Q&A. Thank you so much for being here. I've missed these. I love chatting with you guys, sincerely. I feel like I should be signing up for a membership to get to do this. It's always fun every single time, and you guys always bring the absolute best questions. So thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the platform to be able to do this. And thank you so much for supporting the channel and the variety of different ways that you guys go about supporting the channel. So thank you so much for that. Excited to talk to you and excited to jump into, I'm sure, what are a variety of different topics. So let's get into it right away. I see Chicken was in here already at 7:11 this morning, making sure he gets his question in right away. Maybe we have two good candidates for D-line coach from the Jets and Bucks, and then the Bears' old defensive coordinator. I fear Matt will pull a Matt and pick the worst option because of his past history. You may have noticed that in all of my episodes, if anyone's really following along, in any of my episodes, in the Pack-A-Day radio show, in my daily chats on Bleacher Report, and anything, I have not talked defensive line coaches yet. And I might not. I will absolutely take a deeper dive into whoever they hire. I definitely want to do that. I've talked about that. I just talked about it on today's episode as well. But it is so hard to evaluate assistant coaches in the NFL. Who's good, who's not good. Certain coaches have a reputation for being a really good coach, and you can see it in their results on the field. And there's certainly an aspect of that. But it's near impossible. Even like the ones that we have light access to during training camp. Like I get an up close and personal view of Luke Butkus coaching the offensive line from time to time. Man, one of my favorite moments from this past year was Jeff Hafley coming and coaching the defensive backs right in front of us, and just hearing the attention to detail and how he went about coaching the DBs and how to press cover, and, kind of making it nuanced for each individual player. Like there are little moments like that we can get from time to time. Those are all really in OTAs, mini camps, training camp, and it depends on the position group. For example, the defensive linemen are way down on that corner of the field, and we can sort of see them if we squint enough, but we can't really make out what the coaches are saying or anything like that. So it's impossible. Like sometimes we get a defensive back, seminar, or linebacker or offensive line seminar right in front of us, and we can hear some of the assistant coaches and what they're saying. But again, that's usually only training camp, maybe mini camp OTAs. And during that period of time in season, you don't really get any of that. And it's a really hard thing to evaluate. A great example is Jason Rebrovich, right? I would evaluate him based on how his defensive line underperformed, especially from a pass rushing standpoint. And it felt like that was a decision that Green Bay was at least semi-likely to make. But I couldn't tell you and look you in the eye of whether or not he was great, if he was terrible, he was anything in between, because I just don't, we don't get access to that. It's hard enough trying to evaluate players, even with the all 22 tape and going through and looking at it with a fine tooth comb. And there's nothing we can really do to evaluate defensive line coaches that way. In the spirit of your question, I do think he's for the most part done a pretty good job filling his staff. So I think some of the coordinator positions are probably a little bit more questionable, but it does seem like he found the defensive coordinator that he needed to be here in Jeff Hafley. I'm hopeful. I'm confident. I think all three options on paper look like all very good options. If they hired any of the three that we know about already, I don't think I would be upset with it, at least on the surface. But I will promise you, Chicken, that as soon as they do hire one of these candidates as a defensive line coach, I will take a deeper dive into that individual and we'll look at it much closer. But for now, your guess is as good as mine. Your evaluation is as good as mine. And I just don't have a great feel. And I never want to come on and talk for, 15, 20 minutes on a defensive line coach. And again, not have a real great feel for exactly who they are, what they do. But I'll try my best once, of course, they do actually hire someone. There's been rumors that Malik Willis could be used as trade bait in a T. Higgins trade. Am I crazy for saying I'd rather keep and extend Willis rather than getting Higgins? Chicken, you are crazy that you would believe that Malik Willis could be used as trade bait in a T. Higgins trade. That is the first thing. First of all, they have Joe Burrow in Cincinnati. So I don't think that there's any real, and I don't think they're going, all crazy to try to get a backup quarterback on a 1-year deal. I don't think that's something that's going to have a ton of value to Cincinnati at this point in time. Not to mention, I don't know if Browning's a free agent or not, but he's actually a pretty good backup QB. He might be an unrestricted this year. He is no, he's under contract in 2025 and then is a restricted free agent in 2026. And he's actually a pretty solid backup QB. So I don't know that Cincinnati would have any real interest in that whatsoever. If you are going to trade Malik Willis, right? And maybe we'll take a look at this a little bit deeper at some point, but my overarching feel for Malik Willis is there's not going to be the appetite for teams around the league that think he's going to be a legitimate, really good starting quarterback. Do I think that he is maybe on the cusp of that like 35th best quarterback in the league to somewhere between like 30 and 35 or maybe 30 and 40, meaning that he could be one of the bottom tier starters or a top tier backup? Yeah, I think he's probably somewhere a little bit in that range. You're not seeing teams give up a ton for that. What I think you would get for Malik Willis, they traded a 7th. I think you could probably, get a 4th round, maybe somewhere between a 4th and a 5th round for Malik Willis at this point. Remember, 1-year deal is all that's left on his contract. And then you'd have to, even if you did hit on it, you'd have to give him a big contract the following season. I don't think it's anything more than a 4th round pick. I would be pretty stunned if Green Bay canvassed the league and could get a top 100 pick from Malik Willis. And if that's the case, if I'm the Packers, I just say, no, I'm good. I'm not necessarily willing to trade, to even get a 4th round pick, which is a pretty solid pick. You're probably getting somebody that's in the top 75 on your draft board. I think the value as a backup quarterback for Malik Willis, even for just a season, is greater than that. And I don't think they're going to find a deal, because I think Green Bay would rather just stick with them for that price for what they can get in return. And I don't think anyone's blowing Green Bay away with an offer. Now, if it's a top 100 pick, anything 1st, 2nd, 3rd, I think you have to take it. I really do, just because you probably only have them for one season. It's a complicated topic. I would like to keep him on the team, but if you're looking at like roster building, is all about making these like sort of incremental increases to your roster and betting on long-term potential and upside. And if you really believe that Malik Willis is only going to be there for 1 year, your hope is that he never sees the field anyway. And even if he does, he's probably not going to, bring you to a Super Bowl or anything like that. To say 1 year of Malik and then maybe he gets you a comp 5th or 6th pick in a future draft based on what contract he gets in the offseason. If I can just get a 3rd rounder now, I probably do it and then sign a veteran backup for this upcoming season and maybe draft a guy as well. But I'd probably take a top 100 pick in return, but I don't think they get it. I think the most likely outcome here is that Malik Willis stays in Green Bay in 2025, is the backup QB. Nobody blows him away with an offer. He will do everything he can in preseason, and if he gets opportunities in the regular season to go ball out and show that he can be a starter in the league, and if he can show that in some way, he would get a big contract in all likelihood from some team in the offseason, and then Green Bay would get a nice comp pick in return for that. But I think where it's at right now is it just makes sense for Green Bay to keep him, and I don't think anyone's going to blow the doors off with an offer, and certainly not the Bengals, and certainly not offering T. Higgins, nor do I know that even Green Bay, because it would be like, even if Willis was involved in that, you're probably talking like a 2nd in Malik Willis or maybe a 1st in Malik Willis, something like that. I don't know that Green Bay has the appetite to trade, something like that, plus give a $30 million a year contract to T. Higgins. I honestly don't think they would just do the contract. I think if T. Higgins says, I want to be a Packer, this is where I want to be, but I want 5 years, $150 million, I think Green Bay just says no without even giving up anything in return. I think even just at that number, I think they say no. I could be wrong, but I think they say no. So I certainly don't think they're going to give $150 million on a 5-year deal, plus give up a huge draft asset plus a player. So I don't see a T. Higgins trade. I don't see T. Higgins being a Packer, and I certainly don't see Malik Willis being somebody that Cincinnati's currently interested in. And I do not see Malik Willis being traded. It's not impossible. Certainly, if you were looking at players that are most likely to be dealt from this team, Jaire Alexander, Malik Willis, probably the top 2 that would come to mind, but I ultimately don't see it happening. John, thank you for the chat, or the question, I should say. 80, how realistic is, say, a Mac Adams and DJ Reed type free agency for Green Bay? I would say very unrealistic. Not all 3. 2 of the 3, maybe. I think you could see maybe 2 out of the 3. I think you could maybe see a Mac and Reed would be the one I would probably say there. I think the likelihood that they would get all 3 is, the likelihood that they get any of them, any one of the 3, is probably not super great. Like if you were having me bet on, a prop that said, will the Packers get either Khalil Mack, Devontae Adams, or DJ Reed? And the yes was like plus 300 and the no is like, whatever. Like, I don't know that I'm betting on the yes on that, so I don't know where I would put those odds, but the odds they get any of them are probably slim. The odds they get two of them are really slim. The odds they get all three is basically impossible. But I like where your head is at overall. I do think, potentially addressing pass rusher, corner, and a wide receiver does make some sense for Green Bay. I've been thinking about this a lot as of late, and I haven't dug into all the free agents quite yet. I'll do that very shortly. We'll start breaking down some of the ones that could make a little bit more sense kind of day by day coming up here. But I'm a little bit confused at the moment, if I'm being honest, as to what Green Bay will really want to do. For an example, last year at this time, we were talking about Xavier McKinney as the most obvious free agent signing for Green Bay that you could look at and just be like, oh my God, this just makes so much sense. It makes all the sense in the world. They have the money. He's the perfect fit. He's a scheme fit. He's a player fit. He's got the right age. He shouldn't be available, but he is. Like, it just made every single set. Like, we were talking about Xavier McKinney at this point last year, a month and a half before free agency started, about how perfect of a fit that he was. And then it happened. It's tougher to see that player this year in this year's class. And what I will also add is, I can see a world in which, because it's offensive line, pass rusher, wide receiver, corner. Those are the four, right? Those are the four potential adds to the roster, the areas of need that you'd like to be addressed in some capacity. Offensive line, I could see them saying, we're good with Rashid, Jordan Morgan, Elton Jenkins, Sean Ryan, and Zach Tom. We like those five. We need to add some depth. We need to get some youth in there, some competition, but we're not going to go spend a big free agent contract on an offensive lineman when we have those five already in place. I could see that. We literally just heard from Brian Gutekunst saying that, basically what they've reviewed is going out and spending big money on a top tier wide receiver. It does not return dividends. It's not what separates the best teams. So I kind of feel like, unless that's just a really well-placed red herring from Brian Gutekunst, that might not be where they address it. Pass rusher is going to be tough. There's not a 1A pass rusher that's available. We literally just heard Goody say that they don't really want players at the end of their prime or that are, towards the tail end of their career. I think Khalil Mack makes a ton of sense, but we literally just heard from Goody. Again, maybe a well-placed red herring here, but I don't know that's usually not the direction they go, right? As an older player, they usually want someone in their prime. Maybe more of a Josh Sweat, Milton Williams, somebody from Philly could make a bit more sense there. In the secondary, again, we just heard that he really liked the way that the corner group solidified itself with Carrington Valentine, Keyshawn Nixon, Javon Bullard, and we'll see if Jaire Alexander plays a part in that. And there's not like a 1A perfect corner, although I think DJ Reed is very much in that conversation. But I think you probably have to overpay to get DJ Reed based on this free agent class. And I'm not sure Goody's going to want to do that either. So I'm struggling with there's all these little red herrings or sort of points of confusion where I can't just point to corner and be like, yeah, they're going to spend big there, or defensive line, or edge rusher, or wide receiver, or offensive line. They will somewhere. I very much believe that they will. Trying to put the pieces together of exactly who that is or what position it might be, that's a bit more of an interesting sort of thing to break down. But we'll get there. We'll do it. We'll put a shopping list together, but I don't think all three is realistic at all. Maybe one of the three gets to Green Bay. Maybe this is just Cope, but the whole season really felt like a sophomore slump for the offense. I'm confident Matt LaFleur and Jordan will get back to second half of 2023 form. That's certainly the hope. Whether it's Cope or hope, that is up to you. I think that's definitely the hope. I don't think the last few games were indicative of who this Packers offense or who this Packers team is at all. It's disappointing. It's frustrating. No question about it. But I don't think that's who they are. I think they're going to find a way to be really good on offense once again. And I think they'll get Jordan back on track. And I do think the injuries played a part, if not a significant part, in his, just kind of progress or lack thereov through the course of the season. So yeah, I think there's absolutely something to that. And then, whether or not that's, end of 2023 or what that looks like in totality, that's a little bit more different. I don't know. I don't know what that peak looks like in 2025, but I'm excited to see. And I do think that they will ultimately find a way to improve, get better. And I talked about this from a sophomore slump standpoint. I talked about how I thought, 2023 was adolescence. It was fun. It was joy. It was joyful. You don't really have to worry about anything yet. There were no bills to pay or anything like that. Just fun adolescence, right? And then it felt like 2024 was puberty. Like there were some changes, some weird changes that went on that we did not expect, and like some weird growth things going on. And it was awkward. It was awkward 2024, and now 2025. Hopefully, we see a mature adult version of this Green Bay Packers team. That's what I'm going with. That's what I'm hoping for. Josh, you hear a lot about this year being a disappointment or a regression. That being said, who wins 2024 Packers versus 2023 Packers and why? It's an impossible question because I want to know which version of each that I'm getting, right? If I get early 2023 Packers versus sort of that middle of the season, like even the team that played against the Seahawks in 2024, I'm going to take the 2024 team. If I get the team that showed up against the Cowboys in 2023 or the Chiefs or the Lions when they went to Thanksgiving, and I get that version of 2023 taking on the 2024 version that lost to the Bears in the final game of the season, or that went down 28-0 to the Vikings. Well, give me the 2023 version. If I get the 2023 version that could barely beat Bryce Young, or that gave up the most nuclear day ever to Baker Mayfield, I don't really like that 2023 version. If I get the 2024 version, heck, even that, with Malik Willis that was running around everywhere and the offense looked great and the defense was showing signs of progress, I might take that. So it's an impossible question to answer because I feel like we really saw a complete Jekyll and Hyde from the Packers in 2023 and maybe even more so in 2024. So I don't know which team is showing up to that fight. Here's the answer. The 2023 and 2024 Packers, whichever team gets to defer to the second half and doesn't get the ball first, whichever team ends up taking the ball first is probably going to lose that game. That's how I'm going to answer that question. Good afternoon, Andy and fellow members. Matthew, good afternoon to you as well. Thank you so much for being here. B. Brown, what's up to you? What's your take on Robert Saleh going into next season what will his job actually be? I think right now I think there's probably a 40 to 50% chance that he gets the Jaguar shot, maybe closer to 40, maybe 33, maybe 1-3. I think Joe Brady's going to be somebody that they're really interested in there. I think they might bring in a few more faces after the eliminations this week and going into the Super Bowl where they can actually interview some people. I think they can, even for the Super Bowl teams. But I think they may take a little bit more time on it. But I think Robert Saleh could end up in Jacksonville. We'll see if he gets the job there. If not, I think he ends up being the defensive coordinator in San Francisco. I think those are probably the two jobs that I would lean towards him having, either head coach in Jacksonville or defensive coordinator in San Fran. I think those are the most likely outcomes here for Robert Saleh. Lots of discussions about Packers pass rush not being very effective. 5. What do you think impacts a single game more, 1 sack or 3 to 5 pressures? Yeah, I saw a lot of this conversation going on yesterday with pressures and sacks and things like that. I kind of do like how Ken Ingalls put it yesterday, if I'm being honest. Sorry, I want to see if I can pull this up really quick here because he put it ever so eloquently. Give me 1 second. All right, so somebody posted, here was sort of the thread. Somebody posted, pressures are by definition productivity. And Ken Ingalls said, disagree. I saw Rashawn Gary get a pressure on Jalen Hurts for an almost 10-yard sack. Instead, Hurts juked him and he scrambled for a 15-yard gain and a first down. Sometimes pressure results are good. Sometimes they are not. There is never a situation where a sack is a bad outcome. And then he said, in response to Wendell, he said, pressures are like tackles. The totals mean nothing without the context of the results that they generate. I really like that. I think that's super smart from Ken. And I'm with him. I think in general, if you have a defensive lineman that is racking up pressures, that's what that means is they're winning up front against their offensive linemen. That is a very, very, very important trait. Just the chaos that causes is a huge plus. For example, what I would tell you is if you showed me 2 players side by side and you said, you can have the player that has 64 pressures and 5 sacks, or you can have the player that has 15 pressures and 10 sacks, which one do you want? Give me the pressure guy every single day. Every single day. That's the player that I want. That's going to cause more chaos in the long term. That shows me that they are beating their man up front. It also would probably tell me that they have maybe a finishing issue, that they can't get the quarterback to the ground, and or they don't have the players around them to also collapse a pocket to make it easier for said player to actually get that quarterback to the ground. They may have an escape lane somewhere else, maybe due to other deficiencies around the defensive line. So I want the pressure guy. All right, period, end of story. But it does not tell the whole story. An individual pressure may be great, or it might end up being terrible. You might run yourself out of the lane, miss the quarterback, and the lane that you just ran yourself out of is now open for that quarterback to step into. We saw that with Tommy DeVito last year. Pressure's coming out. They get there. They can't get him to the ground. Huge lane, and he takes off and runs for a huge gain. That's a bad pressure. So I think in the context of an individual play, you have to look at it and say, all right, I just a pressure in and of itself doesn't tell me a full story. In general, I will take the player who generates a lot more pressure than a player who might have more sacks but doesn't generate a ton of pressures. I want the pressure guy. It's going to result in more interceptions, incompletions, sacks, turnovers, etc. over the course of time overall for the team. I was going to add one more thing on top of that too, but yeah, I think that's ultimately the story. But I think you do have to look at it with a more fine-tooth comb and say, why is that happening? And again, some players are really good pressure players, but they just can't finish at the point of attack. They don't have that either that closing burst to the quarterback to get them to the ground, or maybe they take a bad false step, or maybe they're juked too easily by a quick move by a quarterback. Maybe they don't have the speed, whatever it might be. You have to look at that as a GM and as a coach to say, what can we do to help minimize that, or why is that happening? But I will generally take pressures, but it is an incomplete statistic. And you do have to look at the totality of exactly what's going on by looking at the tape. All right. Let's see. I watched Ben Johnson's comment on the floor with him just gassing up Campbell and O'Connell. It just came across as disrespectful to Matt. I guess it's one way to embrace being a heel. That was sort of the weird part of it. If I had to guess, I think in his mind, what he was trying to do / say was give everyone in the division, by basically trying to say, I have so much respect for Dan Campbell and Matt LaFleur and Kevin O'Connell. It's one of the best coach divisions in the NFL. But I have to say, I did enjoy beating Matt LaFleur the last, 2 times this past season, or beating him twice a year, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, or whatever. I think that's what he intended to do. And I think that's what his overall message wanted to be. I think sometimes we forget, and maybe coaches forget, I know that you are up on a stage. It does not necessarily mean that you are a comedian that can play to a crowd very well. Those are two very different things. There are certain rhythm and timing aspects that go into comedy and punchlines that you have to master if you want to be good at it. And I think number one, that one failed tremendously as just to get any sort of reaction or laughs. It was just a fart in the wind, and everyone just was like, all right, cool. It was very awkward, very cringe. And then on top of that, it comes to your point, Dylan, it came across as very disrespectful to Matt LaFleur, because I genuinely do not believe that that's the way that he probably felt or wanted that to come across. I could be wrong, could easily be wrong. Maybe he just wanted to be a dick to Matt LaFleur. I have no idea, but it did come across that way. And it's sort of weird to kind of do that. Be like, hey, these two coaches in the division, awesome coaches. Dan Campbell, Kevin O'Connell, unbelievable. Man, do I love beating Matt LaFleur twice a year, though. All right, cool, bro. It's just awkward. It's just weird. I don't think it's, at the end of the day, I don't think Matt LaFleur is going to, again, show it to his team and be like, guys, look at, he made fun of me. Let's play harder today. I don't think there's going to be anything like that, but it was just a weird sequence. And it was mostly a good introductory press conference from what I saw. I don't think it's going to be, again, any major talking point from here on out, but it was definitely weird in the moment. Do you think we draft a quarterback? If so, what round? Abel, I talked about this a little bit in the episode that I did of Green Bay's biggest needs, and I ranked them from 10 to 1. And number 10 on my list was a developmental / lottery ticket quarterback. And the first thing I will say here is you can't just populate that into thin air, okay? A couple things need to happen. One, there needs to be a quarterback that you like as a developmental prospect that's available in day 3 of the draft. And then when that happens, they have to fall to you in a round that makes sense for you. And then the other thing that needs to happen is that player is actually the best player available on your board, the one that you want the most. It could be that they have this really cool developmental quarterback that falls to them in round 6, and they're like, yeah, I would really like this player, but they might have an offensive lineman that they have graded 2 rounds higher that also happened to fall to them at that point. And they're like, all right, I would love to take this quarterback here. It makes a ton of sense, but I can't say no to this offensive lineman. I have a 4th round grade on this offensive lineman. They're here in the 6th. All the rest of my picks have 6th round grades, including this developmental quarterback. He would be my next choice, but there's no comparison here. Put the name on the card. It's the offensive lineman. So not only does that player need to exist, It needs to exist and fall to a pick where Green Bay is selecting at a pick where Green Bay feels confident in it. And it has to be, again, the best player available on your board, or you're just going to go with that other player. And it doesn't always happen that way. But in theory, yes, I would love for Green Bay to take a lottery ticket developmental quarterback in some point in day 3 of the draft, probably rounds 5, 6, 7, somewhere in that. I don't think you need to spend a top 4 on it. But if it was the 4th round and you loved a guy, I have no problem with that. If it was round 3 and you loved a guy, I don't really have a massive problem with it. I think it's the most important position in sports. So if you like a QB, you see him there, go out and take it. But yeah, I think late day 3 makes sense. And if not, is there a former early round draft pick that you can bring in as a developmental guy as well? Zach Wilson could potentially be available. Somebody in that realm, right? Of like, hey, do we want to just see if we can bring this guy in and maybe we get a Sam Darnold out of it or something like that. So I would love to see Green Bay bring in some competition. They're going to bring in a 4th quarterback. They're not going to go into OTAs, mini camps, and training camp with just 3 in all likelihood. I think they'll bring in a 4th at some point and then see if that quarterback can hang with Sean Clifford. And then they'll have to make the determination if they are worthy of being a number 3 on the 53 man, or if they need to release him and try to get him back in the practice squad. Those will all be conversations for a later date. But I do love the idea. But again, it doesn't always work out the way that you want it to either. So the right situation has to present itself. But if so, it'd be great. And I think rounds 5, 6, or 7 would be perfect for that for Green Bay. It's a pretty good way of juicing up the rivalry from a Bears perspective. Do you want it like? Here's my text from my friend. I read this this morning on the radio, and I was talking about. So I tweeted out about the introductory press conference, and he said, "quote I thought Ben did an excellent job today, and I was very impressed. With that being said, I am so bleeping sick of each new coach and GM saying something along those lines. Just beat the Packers. Don't tell everyone you're going to do it. Just do it." So that was his take. And this is a Bears fan. And then he said, "I swear it's part of the contract that each of them sign. Got to take a dig at the Pack in the introductory press conference." So like even he was very much, again, as a Bears fan, of just like, enough talking about beating the Packers. Just go do it. Just go do it. And you don't need to bring it. Like, can you imagine? And again, I haven't listened to Matt LaFleur's opening press conference in a long time. I'd be pretty stunned if I went back and listened to it and he was talking about Minnesota or Detroit or Chicago. He's focused on Green Bay. Green Bay's focused on Green Bay. Like if you're Chicago, you've got your own fires to put out in your organization. You've got a ton of cleaning to do. You're in a glass house right now. Like you worry about you. You don't have to worry. And I hope he enjoyed beating Matt LaFleur twice in a year, because I don't see it happening for the foreseeable future. I don't see all of a sudden the Bears just owning Green Bay in any real capacity. But yeah, it's just a weird situation. Even though it seemed to go over like a lead balloon in the room. Yeah, it was weird. Can we start a petition to get Mike Wall on staff with the Packers? Dude knows ball and stresses the fundamentals. I think that's exactly what the team needs. I'd be all for it. I love Mike. Mike's the absolute best. I told him this on the last show that we did this past year, but he has an unbelievable and innate ability to be super logical and super smart about what he does, right? I love the process-driven approach. He's a former player. He has that going for him. But then to be so articulate and well-rounded, and not just like, that if he wanted to come on every week and just go level 700 on this thing and just go football jargon and spit out a bunch of X's and O's at a level that some of us may understand, but like a lot of people are not. But his ability to regurgitate all of that information in a very reasoned, well-mannered, easy to understand way is beautiful. And then he always has empathy with it as well. It's not always like, even when you can tell that he, like Quay had a rough game, right? He always tries to put it in a way that's like, that braces it as much as possible and that buffers it a little bit, because I know how much respect he has for all of these players and how hard they are working and what they're putting into it. And he really uses that empathy as well. He just is a really well-rounded human being. I love talking to him every single week, and I would love for him to be in the organization in some capacity. He's killing it in Germany right now, so I don't see that happening, but I would very much love for that to happen in some capacity at some point. Is it too start to banging the drum for a Fennel interview? Yesterday, spent my time going through and starting to put some lists together for topics that I want to get to and definitely have Ben Fennell guest appearance on my list of things to do here. So we'll get that. It was around this time last year that we did sort of a season recap with Ben. So we'll try to get him on sometime in the near future. Maybe not next week, maybe the following week, but I'll definitely be touching base with him soon and seeing if we can get him on. I don't think Ben gives one crap about RAS, if I'm being honest with you. I could listen to you and Justice nerd out about football for hours. Do you plan on having him on again soon? Another thing, I wanted to give Justice kind of a couple weeks off. And I wanted to take a couple weeks, just sort of sans gas and just kind of get back in a rhythm with everything, sort of a more of an off-season rhythm. But I do want to have a conversation with Justice to see a couple of different things, kind of put a plan together for how we can, try to get him on more, utilize him more, because he's tremendous. And I know from just the numbers and also from the comments that a lot of people really love when Justice and I get together and talk ball. And I think it benefits both he and I and everyone if we can try to do a little bit more of that. So that's definitely in the realm of possibility, but I just have to I have to do some off-season brainstorming, some season brainstorming together, see how I kind of want to put things together for this next year. And once I do that, I'll be reaching out to Justice and we'll try to put a plan together and see what makes sense for everybody. But I'm hoping to have certainly more Justice and not less Justice. That's for sure. Where do you have Jordan among NFC quarterbacks? I feel like some of the issues Jordan has had were very reminiscent of Josh Allen earlier in his career. Richard, I don't know that I have a perfect answer for this right now, and I don't mean to blow off your question by any stretch of the imagination, especially, obviously, you're here as a member and want to know the answer to it. A couple things that I want to say. I don't know that we can make a firm determination on what Jordan was this season. It's so hard for me to tell how much of it was injury issues, how much of if it was the offense, the wide receivers. I think that's a really tough thing to kind of have a pulse on. What I'm hoping to do is have a better pulse on that as I go back and watch all of Jordan's throws. I'm going to probably go back and watch a ton of 2023, especially the end of 2023, probably from Pittsburgh on, and then watch all of 2024. And I really want to see, what it looks like going back and looking at it in hindsight and seeing just how it looked on film again. Obviously, I went through and graded everything. And I've seen it on all 22 already, but I think sometimes just taking a step back and then rewatching it can be really, really helpful. So I want to go do that. And once I do that, I think I'll have a better answer, hopefully, to your question. So in due time, that might not be for a hot second. That's probably more of a, June, July project, meaning that gap after mini camp is done. And then, before training camp starts. So we might be a few months away before something like that happens, maybe February, depending on how February goes. But yeah, we'll take that one step at a time. And I definitely want to get there at some point. No question about it. To give you my gut reaction is I think he can still be a top quarterback in the NFC. I think the inconsistencies are apparent, both from an accuracy, timing, fundamental standpoint. I think there's clearly things that he needs to clear up and clean up. I think there are, a few more concerns that I have coming out of this season than I certainly had at the end of 2023, but I think they're correctable. And I think he's going to come out and have a really good year in 2024. That's my gut feel, at least. Ralph, thank you so much for the super chat. Appreciate that a ton. Looking at Eagles draft classes compared to ours the past few years, I'm sick to my stomach. Yes, you do have to remember the Eagles have had some better draft capital in some of those, like Green Bay couldn't have drafted Jalen Carter, right? So there's definitely a piece of that, but it's usually what's going to separate the good from the great teams. No question about it. And obviously they did some really good work. So for example, right, Quinyon Mitchell got taken before Green Bay's draft pick. I don't know if they would have taken Quinyon Mitchell either way, but he got taken before Green Bay was selecting. They certainly could have taken Cooper DeJean on a couple different occasions. Jalen Carter, they could not have had. I don't think you're losing really a ton of sleep over Nolan Smith, if I'm being totally honest. Good player. Jordan Davis, they could not have had. Nakobe Dean, they could have. They could have had Nakobe Dean. That would have been a good pick. Devontae Smith, they could not have had. They could have had a Landon Dickerson or a Milton Williams. But if you look at, if you're looking back at, 2021, 22, 23, 24, the players that you're really looking at are Devontae Smith, Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Quinyon Mitchell, right? Those are really kind of the main four that they've had. Green Bay was not in positions to draft any of those players in any of those drafts. Devontae Smith went 10th. Jordan Davis went 13th. Jalen Carter went 9th. Quinyon Mitchell went 22nd. They've had some early picks, and those are really the ones that are separating it. I'm not saying they haven't had other good picks. Nakobe Dean, Nolan Smith, Cooper DeJean, certainly. Landon Dickerson in second round, Milton Williams. There's definitely some other ones as well in there during that time frame. But what really separates them is their early picks that they hit on. Now, Green Bay, to be fair, if you want to look at it from the opposite side, had a very early pick with LVN that has not turned out. There's a Christian Gonzalez out there that changes things quite a bit. Whether you want to go back to the Creed Humphrey, Josh Myers, like there's definitely some changes that you make just one or two quick ones and it looks a whole hell of a lot different. But I will also say that Philly's picked very early in a lot of those drafts and they've hit on those early picks, which they should do. And Green Bay did not have the opportunity to draft some of those high-end players that Philly did end up with. With Tom Clements retiring, does that affect Jordan's play? Yes, but I don't know if it's for better or worse yet. There's an argument to be made that sometimes when you get to this point, that the lessons that Tom could instill within Jordan are there already. That there's maybe not a whole ton more that Tom can give to Jordan. I would be willing to bet if and maybe I'm wrong, but I would bet that who knows what's going on in Tom's personal life or anything like that. But if he felt like there was a huge step still that he could instill in Jordan and really, give him more than that he's been able to give so far, my guess is he probably sticks around for one more year to be able to do that. If I had to guess, I think Tom's probably given Jordan everything that he needs to know at this point. And now you bring in a new quarterbacks coach and they have some different things that hopefully they can teach Jordan. So it could be a positive. It could very well be a negative. It could just be a net neutral. It could be, Jordan's kind of Jordan and it's going to be more about the decision-making in the moment than anything that his QB coach is going to do. But I would say it probably leans towards affecting it in a slightly negative way. But I don't think we're going to look at it midway through the season and be like, oh my God, I can't believe, look at without Tom Clements, he can't even function out there. I don't think it's going to be anything like that. And again, who knows? It could be a positive as well that there's some new ideas in the room and maybe that benefits Jordan, but only time will tell with that one. Nagler said the other day, thank you again for the super chat, by the way. Nagler said the other day that this is your team and they will not change on how they draft. They have certain types. That really pisses me off. Sometimes change is good. They are very stubborn. Yeah. So what I will say is this is who they are as a franchise. I agree with Aaron. And I think for the most part, they are going to stick to their ways. I do think there's always evolutions to things. You would have said coming from Ted Thompson that this is a team that does not like to spend in free agency. Goody's changed that quite a bit. He's gone out and spent significant money in free agency when he's had it. You would say coming from Ted that this is a team that will never borrow from the future to pay for guys right now. Brian's gone very aggressively in the opposite direction, showing that he's willing to borrow money from multiple future salary caps to buy a team that can go and compete right now. Not right now per se, but in 2020, 2021, 2022 for sure. So there are evolutions that take place with that. I can't look you in the eye and say, and I guarantee you that Brian's made evolutions on his drafting. And I think we've seen that. If you look at the first 3 or 4 drafts that he's had and the last few that he's had, there's definitely been some differences in that. Even just look at the difference between Amari Rodgers and Jaden Reed, right? Amari Rodgers, early 3rd round selection, they traded up to get him. Jaden Reed, late 2nd round selection, they traded down and got him, but taken in very similar positions of the draft. Some GMs would say, hey, we just 2 years ago, we took a slot gadgety type wide receiver, moved up to get him in the 3rd round in the top 100 of the draft, and he busted terribly. And we're not going to make that mistake again. And we're not going to take a gadgety, shorter wide receiver in the 2nd round anymore. We're not going to do that, or in the top 100. We've learned our lesson from that. The lesson isn't necessarily not to do that. The lesson is what was Amari Rodgers lacking and what would Jaden Reed bring to the table that's different? Well, if you go back and watch Jaden Reed's tape, there's a huge difference. His run after the catch ability is, I think, a little bit different, a little bit more dynamic, but more importantly, the contested catch stuff, the jump ball stuff. Jaden Reed was more of a pure wide receiver than more, just a gadgety guy. And they learned their lessons from Amari, and they could have just said, we're not doing that anymore. And instead, Goody says, no, we're going to do it again, but we're going to get it right this time. And he gets it right. I think people fail to realize sometimes that there are evolutions of general managers and figuring out what they do well as GMs and what they are successful with and how they operate and how they can make the team best successful. We also heard Brian say pretty clearly he wants this organization to have some urgency. He goes out and drafts a 20-year-old project player that's not going to be ready till 2027. I'm not sure that you can tell the rest of the team to have urgency when you're doing that at the top of the first round. So I'm not of the mind completely that Goody's not capable of evolving or making different decisions. And in fact, I think there has been signs that he has evolved as a general manager. That being said, this overall overarching philosophy of draft and develop, building through the draft, having a system and a philosophy for how you want to go about drafting and developing players, and how you acquire players via free agency in the draft and those sort of things, I believe is an overall good thing. Usually teams that don't have a vision and a consistent way of going about doing things are destined to fail. Now, are tweaks needed to that vision over time when maybe you're not getting the results that you want? Unequivocally. Absolutely. No question about it. Absolutely have to. But I don't think Goot is immune from evolving. I think we've seen him evolve. And now, of course, the big thing is for him to find those elite level talents. Hopefully Edgerrin Cooper can be that. Not even sure that, somebody like Evan Williams couldn't be that. But he's got to figure out ways to get more elite level talent in the building via the draft. And I think there's probably going to be some looking in the mirror from him in the organization of like, how can we do a better job of getting top tier talent in the draft and making sure that we're hitting on those guys, specifically in the first round. I'm sure he's looking at that. There's 0% chance that Goody looks at his first round picks as of late, and specifically what he got out of them in 2024, and says, yep, what we did with Eric Stokes, Devontae Wyatt, Quay Walker, LVN, to a lesser extent, Jordan Morgan, what we did there was really, really good and set us up for success. He's going to be honest with himself and say that was not good enough. Now, how do we get better? And he will work with his staff, and his staff will work with him, and they will figure out ways to hopefully be better moving forward. But it will be important that Brian learns from some of those mistakes and gets better moving forward. But I do think there is an evolution there, and I don't think it's just going to be the same thing over and over and over. And by the way, like we talk about, I'm so sick of Green Bay taking these hyper athletic project players. So what Edgerrin Cooper was. Hyper athletic project player. You might say, well, Andy, he was a really good linebacker in college. He was, but he wasn't even really playing a true linebacker position in college. It was different. It was a run and chase. There was a big learning curve, which is why it took the beginning of the season for him to really settle into that position. He was because if he was that ready, he's going because everyone saw the tools, everyone saw the talent. The question was going to be, how does he transition? And a lot of those run and chase linebackers from college do not transition well to the NFL. There was a projection there for Edgerrin Cooper, big time. If there wasn't, you're talking about a top 15 pick in the draft. I mean, Jack Campbell, who is not even anywhere near the athlete or prospect, overall, kind of high end upside player that Edgerrin Cooper went in the first round. And Cooper went in the second because of that very reason. So I get sometimes you get frustrated by high RAS project sort of player, not ready to come in and compete right away. That's what Edgerrin Cooper was. That worked out pretty well. So there's no perfect formula here, but there's zero question that Goody has to do a better job finding and identifying that talent and making sure he's getting elite level talent on this team. Can you describe the Packers' top players as Luigi's Pizzas? I'll give you creative freedom on this one. It just seems kind of fun. All right. Josh Jacobs is the supreme. And I'm going to say the supreme fresh dough pizza. I'm going to go with that one. Because he's everything that you need him to be, and he's going to fill you up. He's like, hey, I got this. I'm going to give you everything that you need. It's going to be filling. It's going to be delicious. It's going to be phenomenal. So supreme self-riser is Josh Jacobs. I'm going to go with ultra thin crust pepperoni for Xavier McKinney because it's so consistent. It is the best every single time. Like I could eat a ultra thin crust pepperoni Luigi's Pizza every day, and it's going to hit every single time. Not Xavier McKinney. He will be there for you every single time you need him, Mr. Consistency, and it's going to be amazing. Those are the two that come to mind. Those are the top players. I'm trying to think if I have any other sort of Quay Walker is the breakfast pizza. Man, when it hits, it really hits. Like it is so good. When you have that moment that you like everything clicks together and you're feeling like a breakfast pizza, man, it is phenomenal. And you look at it and be like, why is this not happening all the time? I need this to happen all the time. But there's other times you're just not feeling a breakfast pizza. Certainly at night, late nights, you're not feeling it. There's certain mornings where you just get up and you're like, do I really want to throw in a pizza in the morning? It just, sometimes it doesn't feel right. It doesn't fit at the exact moments. But my goodness, when you want a breakfast pizza and it's clicking on all cylinders, it is amazing. That's Quay Walker. When it looks great, it looks great. Other times you look at it and you're just like, I want nothing to do with you right now. I'm good. So those are my three that I can think of off the top of my head. All things considered, question on the fly, comparing pizzas to Packer players. I think that's about as good as I could possibly give to anyone at this point in time. All right. She said, Joey, no Cooper for defensive rookie of the year is insane to me. I disagree with that. There's an argument to be made. No question about it. I think, first of all, Jared Verse is the very clear and obvious rookie of the year. Now, if you want to put him on the list, if he should be in the top 5, I will understand that argument a little bit more. This to me just comes down to playing time. 549 snaps, and that includes the playoffs, right? Which you are not including into that. So 489 snaps in the regular season for Edgerrin Cooper. Like, a lot of these guys are playing double that. And I think that's where it really gets into. And you really, like, the first, 5 weeks of the season, he barely played for the first 4 weeks for sure. 11 snaps against Philly in week 1, 7 snaps against Indy in week 2, 18 against Tennessee. So he rarely played, then missed a couple weeks in the middle of the season with an injury. From weeks 9 through 14, he only played, from weeks 10 through 14, he only played 1 week and there. And it wasn't really until really the Seattle game in week 15 that he took off, and it was just like, all right, now he's hit another level. So I love Edgerrin Cooper. I mean, I think we're talking about high-end, legitimate all-pro potential here, like high-end all-pro potential. So this is no disrespect to Edgerrin Cooper at all. If you were redrafting, man, I know Jared Verse is probably still the first defensive player off the board, but now we're immediately getting into a conversation of where are you slotting Edgerrin Cooper, and he could be anywhere near the top of that list after that point. So he's phenomenal. Green Bay's lucky to have him. I just think based on some of the missed time due to injuries and the early slow start, I can't quite get it there for defensive rookie of the year. Again, if you wanted to put him in the list of 5, I would have no concern with that, but I don't take much umbrage with this because of the lack of playing time. Enjoyed the Goot draft review episode. Do you think Goot needs to pivot on his approach, specifically using top picks on high upside? We just talked about that a little bit. That's how you get an Edgerrin Cooper too. So here, I've talked about this in the past, and I think there probably does need to be an adjustment here, but I do believe what Goody is doing is going high risk, high reward in the first rounds. And for a while, it looked really impressive. Getting Jaire Alexander, Rashawn Gary, Jordan Love, like that was looking pretty good for a while. Obviously, things have changed with some of the injuries and Gary and Jaire not quite being the same, but the home run swings seem to be paying off. And then as of late, those home run swings with Quay Walker, with LVN, with Devontae Wyatt to a lesser extent, have not been, Eric Stokes, have not been paying off as much. I love the idea in theory. We're going to take somebody that we think has the highest upside, because it's not going to be a good player that gets us to the finish line. It's going to be elite high-end players that get you to the finish line. Like it's the funny, weird aspect of this is we're talking about Goody needing to do a better job of finding elite end talent. And his first round philosophy is really all about finding elite high-end talent. I like the philosophy. The execution has been poor. That, I think, is where you need to sort of look at it. Listen, like take all of the super high-end players that you want to try to hit on that superstar stud that comes in and just crushes it. I'm cool with that, but you got to hit on some. Like, even quite frankly, right? If either Eric Stokes or LVN or Quay Walker or, Devontae Wyatt, if any of them hit at a high level, right? And I'm talking high-end Pro Bowl or all-pro level. If you have right now Devontae Wyatt as an all-pro, I'm not saying Aaron Donald-esque or Chris Jones-esque, but like a really phenomenal defensive tackle, we're not even talking about this. If LVN hits as the next big time, TJ Watt-esque pass rusher, or Max Crosby-esque pass rusher, Aiden Hutchinson, Nick Bosa, whomever, we're not even talking about this. If Eric Stokes hits as a close to shutdown corner on the outside, we're not talking about this. But you have Quay Walker was playing like Fred Warner. We're not talking about this, but they're not. And none of them are. I like what he's doing philosophically. I don't like what he's doing from an execution standpoint. To me, the philosophy is fine, but some tweaks are very clearly needed if you want to get the outcome that you're hoping for. Yep, we just talked about that. Sorry, I think I doubled that one up. You and Justice have really good chemistry together. I appreciate that, Dylan. I always love talking to Justice. It's always a good time. Now, a lot of people say next year's center's on the roster, but just off of memory, I don't feel like Jenkins or Ryan seem to play great in limited snaps. How do you feel about those two or Monk? Well, I will say, I think, Elton Jenkins was a really good center in college, and I'm a little bit less there with Sean Ryan, but I think you could do it. I'm less willing to make a judgment on what they look like at center in a very small sample size when they have to make a very quick transition to that spot and didn't get a bunch of time to work on it. If they went into the offseason, right, and said, hey, starting very first mini camp, Elton Jenkins is going to be our center, I have zero doubt whatsoever that he will be a really good center. Like, I think he'll be a really good center. Sean Ryan, I think, is a more interesting conversation, but I think with time and practice, he would be just fine there too. But I'm less concerned about some of the issues that they had in some very small sample size while not practicing it as much. And I think both of them would generally be fine, especially Elton, if that's what they wanted to do long term. I just think you can't like jump around and make those decisions quite as willy-nilly. I think you need, if you're going to say Jenkins is going to be our center, awesome. Just make him the center, stick with it, and let him stay there then. And don't rotate a bunch of guys or things like that. I would love to say that Monk could be in that conversation as well. But I will say he seemed to fall out of favor pretty aggressively, was inactive almost in every game at the end of the year. I like him. He'll maybe get a chance, but he's going to have to go a long way to kind of prove himself at this point. Thanks for keeping up with the live streams. Love and appreciate all your hard work. Will, you are more than welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Andy, what would your number one position to address in free agency? Pass rush. I think if you can add a top tier, not even top tier, but like a really good pass rusher to this team in some capacity, I think that brings you defensively to a whole different level. And you're going from top 8-ish defense to top maybe 3-4 defense. I really do. So I think pass rusher would be number one on my list. For people who question the Packers draft tendencies, what would be a different ideology that would consistently work? Because you need to have some sort of process just drafting football guys. It's very well said. And I've gone over this a million times. There's no perfect formula. And Green Bay might need to look at that sometimes too and say like, hey, our formula is not perfect. We can't. But more often than not, I think you're seeing, Green Bay get results out of most draft classes. 2021 is really the difference there. But that was after the COVID year. That was a weird draft for kind of everyone. So yeah, I'm willing to give a little bit of accident forgiveness there. And I think overall they're finding good players. Now the question is, how can we find great players? And they have to find a way to make that jump a little bit. And again, there's no perfect philosophy. You hopefully have some really good scouts in your building who are really smart at what they're doing and can project. But man, I'm telling you, it is easier said than done. And nobody's just, ever dominated to a super crazy extent at it. It's a little bit of a crapshoot. You need a little bit of luck. You need a little bit of, right player, right system, right moment. But Green Bay, for whatever it is, whatever it's lacking, does need to be better at finding ways to but find that top end talent. All right. Any chance they bring Jaire back with a restructured contract? Possible, yes. Likely, no. It's not completely out of the realm of possibility. I just think if you go to Jaire and his agent and say we want to restructure, they're just like, no, we're good. I think they're like, we want to go somewhere else. So I just don't see it happening. It doesn't seem like that relationship's in a good enough spot where you can compromise on a contract. I think Green Bay's probably going to want to go way lower. Jaire, I don't know if he's even going to be of the mind that it should go any lower. And I think you probably just end up in no man's land. And I think you either end up with a trade or a cut. I don't think he's back. I don't think he's restructured. I think it's a trade or a cut. And I think that's the question. Could be wrong. Have been wrong before. Will definitely be wrong again. But if I were betting on it right now, I would say it's unlikely that he's back. And I think it's most likely a trade or a cut. Let's see. I'm not a huge Quay guy either, but I will say that with Coop's rise, I kind of feel like with an offseason to build chemistry between them, I think Quay could work much better as a number 2 linebacker. Yeah, I think Mike Wall brought this up of like, if Quay Walker was like a 4th round pick, we'd probably have a much different view of him, right? He's a pretty solid guy that can come in, play some snaps, athletic, can cover, can do some things. Like you'd probably feel like, yeah, it's a nice use of a 4th round pick or a 5th round pick or something like that. think it's just the expectations of a first round pick. I'm not a Quay guy. I'm not. I will say those 2 games in the middle of the year this year were awesome, really, really awesome. I love that Quay Walker. And if that guy shows up consistently, look the hell out. They're gonna have arguably the best linebacker duo in football if that guy shows up consistently. It's been what 3 years now, and this will be his 4th year, and we've never seen anything consistent from Quay. So I'm not exactly holding my breath, but I love that version of him. We just haven't unfortunately seen that enough. Richard, appreciate all your great work this season. A lot of great content. Make sure you rest. Go Pack Go. We'll get there. A little bit busy still this week, slowing down a little bit. And then, this weekend should be really nice actually. And then, going into next week is I kind of still have like I have 2 to-do lists every day. I have sort of short-term to-do list and long-term to-do list. And then on my long-term to-do list, that like kind of bleeds into my day-to-day and, try to knock off one of those things every day. My long-term to-do list is getting shorter. My daily to-do list is getting shorter. So we'll get there very, very soon. Might take a week or 2 yet, but then it should calm down a little bit. And then again, we get to dive into a bunch of draft stuff and kind of do some more fun stuff, which is always nice in the off season. I feel Ryan, thank you for the super chat here. I feel our top wide receiver could be Romeo, but I don't know that he is vocal enough to lead. Thoughts? Yeah, I'm less concerned about the vocal aspect of it or anything like that. I just think Romeo's a solid, good receiver that's never going to be that alpha top tier guy. Would love to be wrong. As long as I'm wrong when he's still in Green Bay and not playing for another team. But I've never been a huge Romeo guy. I think he's good. I no question about it. And again, some of the really good stuff we've seen from Romeo is really good, but I've never seen anything to indicate that he can consistently be that true number 1 wide receiver. And maybe they don't need that. I still say to this day, if you get the best version of Rome, the best version of Watson, the best version of Reed, the best version of Wicks, that is more than enough. Like if those guys just play up to the levels, the higher levels that we've seen over the last 2 years, each of them, you've got a really good wide receiver core, really, really good wide receiver core. It's just the inconsistencies and the ups and downs that we've seen from all 4 of those that leaves you wanting just a little bit more and a little bit more consistency in that room. So I like Romeo. I'm not as concerned about the locker room stuff. I just don't know that he legitimately has what it takes to be a top 20 wide receiver in this league. What would a reasonable contract for McManus look like? Like 3 years, 14, 3 years, 15, something like that. I feel like, I don't know what's the going rate for kicker. Maybe that's low. I haven't looked at kicker contracts as of late. It's the easiest way to do this on Sport Track. Contracts by position, kicker. All right, so Harrison Butker's at $6.4 million per year. Tucker's at $6 million. Jake Elliott's at $6 million. So who's like Jason Myers is probably like he's in his 30s. He's a good kicker. He's not a great kicker. Graham Gano. All right, Graham Gano at age 36. That's probably a good comp. Is 3 years, $16.5 million, $5.5 million per year. And he just signed that last year. So yeah, if I'm McManus, I'm probably looking for something like that. 3 years, I would say I want to up that a little bit. So I'd say 3 years, $17 million, 3 years, $17.5 million. So 17.5 divided by 3, $5.8 million per year. That's probably in that range is what I'm looking for if I'm McManus. So yeah, somewhere right in there. List of 5 for Cooper is what I meant, not winning it versus deserves it. All right, that's cool. We're on the same page there. Casey Rogers went to Detroit, so off the list for Green Bay defensive line coach. Oh, interesting. So he went from Tampa. Still like the Jets, dude. We'll see if Green Bay can do that. And yeah, I still think the defensive coordinator too for Chicago, who was I believe Bill's defensive line specialist prior to Chicago, if I remember correctly, he could be another really good option. So not necessarily upset that they lost Casey Rogers, but was definitely one of the nice candidates that they have. But I still think they have 2 other good ones at least. Call me crazy, but I'd rather see the Packers trading their first round pick for an established veteran than drafting another developmental player with huge upside who cannot contribute for the first 2 years. Yeah, I mean, sure, I get it. But that's based on the fact that they've missed on their first round draft picks. If you hit, those contracts are super valuable. Those players are insanely valuable. You get 5 years of cheap deals with a first round pick. And the value of that is so immense. Whereas if you trade for a veteran, you're not only giving up that cheap contract for a 5-year player in his prime, You're also, and then potentially somebody that you're hoping is going to get a second contract. You're giving up on that. You're bringing in somebody that you probably have for 2-3 years of their prime, and at best, and you're giving them a massive contract during that time period. So in general, it's bad practice. It's why teams don't do it. Those young rookie contracts are worth their weight in gold, and you have to be able to hit on those. To me, it's more important that Green Bay hits on their early picks than it is that they get rid of them. Getting rid of them is a bad process, but they have to do better at actually drafting them. All right, friends, I do need to get out of here. I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for being here. You're all the best. Thank you so much for being Pack-A-Day members. I will be back for Hall of Fame and All-Pro members. Make sure, or if you haven't, maybe looked at those tiers yet, we're going to be doing a live Q&A next week where for the first 10 people that get here, or at least 9 besides me, it's only 10 people that are able to go on, but you can come on camera as well. And we'll do a Q&A next week. I think that's going to be next Wednesday night. So keep an eye out for that. We'll do our weekly Q&As for all members. We'll try to get some bonus content out here to you guys soon. But yeah, appreciate you a ton. I'll talk to you in the very near future. Happy hour tomorrow at 3 p.m. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.